Hi, this is Kat Owens, and these are some instructions for you to make your very own sewn plastic portrait of a fairy penguin. So we're going to start by learning a couple of ways to thread a needle. This should be pretty basic, but I'll tell you a couple of things I do to make it work better. I'm going to start with the thread that's included in the pack. You're going to get a color. That color is going to be different from all the other colors that other people get. But no matter the color, I think it will make a beautiful portrait. I've done them where the colors match the plastic that I'm sewing, and I've done them where the color of the thread is a contrast to the plastic that I'm sewing, and I think both are delightful in different ways. So what I've done here is just taken the thread off. This is an embroidery thread, I believe. I'm no expert on traditional ways of sewing, but you're going to want to cut it down a little bit. One of the things you have to supply is your own scissors. You're going to get a feel for like how much, wow, these scissors are really dull, how much thread you like to work with, and that can, just be about your own comfort. Then you're going to pull off a couple of these threads to work with. So the amount of thread you use is going to determine kind of the strength of the stitches over time. I typically use one thread and I double it over. But in this case, I think I might use two threads because there should be plenty of thread here in the embroidery set. So you're just going to put the thread through the eye of the needle. These are very large-eyed needles for a reason. And then you need to tie several knots at the end. You can do that just by doing a traditional knot like you would tie with a shoe. But I have a way of doing it that I kind of prefer, and that is to grab the thread, to hold the threads in your left hand. I'm a right-handed person. To hold the needle in your right hand, to take the thread and pass it to your right hand, and then loop it several times along the needle. You're basically building up several knots at once when you make those loops. Then you use the right hand to grab that sort of coil of loops, and you pull it to the end of your thread, and it makes one really big fat knot. That's important because when I'm doing my pieces, I don't have an iron-on transfer. It's just sketched on there, and the thread will go right through the weave of the canvas if it's not several knots. And so that's how I'm used to doing it. And I think it's always a good idea to make it very secure and strong. Now I'm going to show you what my portrait of the fairy penguin looks like and just talk about it a little bit. This is life size. This is the size of the fairy penguin in real life. And in real life, it sort of has this iridescent blue body color that varies depending on whether it's wet or dry or whether it's in the sunlight or not. What I did when I was creating this portrait is I looked on the web and looked at different photographs of fairy penguins, and then I found some colors that I thought were representative of that. But it doesn't have to be sort of like a true to life portrait of the animal. You can really do whatever you like. That's what art's all about. There are a couple of features that I want you to see. I did do sort of like what would be like a darker outline, and that was to make it pop from the background a little bit. I'm trying to fit the whole thing in here and you can't really see it. So against the yellow, it pops pretty well, but when it was next to this blue, it was kind of fading a little bit into the background. So I did that. I've got the little wing here, the chest, which is white, the face, which is white, the beak, which is grayer, and the eye, which is black, and the body, which is blue. The feet, which aren't on yours, are sort of brown and pinkish. That's what the original looks like. I'll put it up close so you can get a sense of it. But I'm hoping people will get really creative and do interesting things with these small portraits. And for mine, actually, I want to make it pink and white, just for fun. So I'm gonna start thinking about that right now. I went to my bins of plastic and picked out some colors that I thought were interesting. This is a darker red. This is red with some white, so from far away that's going to look a little bit lighter. And this is white with pink and orange words and images. You will find that the different kinds of plastic you use make a difference. Things like snack bags and chip bags are made to rip open really easily, and so I find that they're very difficult to work with, that they tend to continue to rip as you work with them. But, you know, you're welcome to try anything you like. There's no wrong way to do this. I've also grabbed something that's predominantly white, so I can use that for the animal's sort of cheek and face and chest. So what I do next is really just begin the process of cutting down pieces of plastic and prepping them to sort of fit the spaces. I don't necessarily plan the whole thing out at the beginning. Certainly on a big one, I am making choices about what kind of pieces I want to use, how I want to bring in different shades or tones, that kind of thing all along. And but I'll kind of plan this one out a little bit so you can get a sense of what it might look like as a finished product. I'm cutting off the clear plastic. Not that you couldn't do something cool with clear plastic. It's just not what I choose to do. Okay, so when I look at my original, I can see that the head's a little darker, the body's a little lighter, and the wing is darker. So I'm gonna work kind of with that in mind. There's also this sort of cheek that's whiter and the head is darker. So with that in mind, I'm gonna try to cut some of this down. I have small scissors that are sharp and large scissors. I find that it just really varies what works with what kind of plastic best or what kind of cut I'm doing. So here we go. I'm kind of cutting around the edges. I'm giving myself a little bit room because I can always, when I add the background, kind of make that tighter and fill in the gaps. You also have to think about, like, if this edge, if you can see that edge is white, so it's going to kind of disappear. So I'd probably want that edge to be the darker red so that it's really coming through as the red right away. When real seamstresses are doing work, they use pens to hold pieces down so that they're in place when they're ready to work on them. You can do that. I got this adorable little pen cushion from a company called Fair Goods that does a lot to make sure they use good materials. So you could use a pen to kind of hold this down. Just be careful you don't stab yourself. That'll give you a sense going forward. I also, with the larger pieces or when I'm doing a hem, sometimes use these reusable clips to hold things down. So I'll demonstrate what that looks like as we go forward. All right, so I know that I want like a little bit of a darker piece here, and I'm thinking this kind of translucent but darker red would be really cool there. It's almost got an orangey undertone as well, which is interesting. Now this is doubled up, so I wonder what it will look like when it's singled out. Well, it's not terrible. it works for me. I still like the way it looks, and I love it if there are words or logos or other things on the pieces, because I think that just is interesting. It does hurt your wrist to kind of do this with it. So normally when I'm working on something, I actually turn the piece, because it's going to affect your wrist over time. So just keep that in mind if you're doing a lot of work like this or any kind of artwork. Oh, I've got my thread right here. I'm going to accidentally cut it if I'm not careful. Give myself a little room here. It's kind of cool. I like the way that's looking. I might use a clip to hold this down. The center part, this chest, is going to be white. So I'm going to use this packaging. I find that it is better to cut off the adhesive strips, both top and bottom, because they are very difficult to sew through. They get really gummy and you have to use a lot of pressure. So I'm just going to eyeball it and cut a piece down so that I can then use that. I save all of these scraps. I have several people who save plastic for me, and I save the plastic my family encounters. But this is not the plastic that I clean up from, you know, when I pick up litter or at beaches, because I find a lot of that is really dirty and I don't believe safe to handle. Okay, so with this, I'm thinking, you know, what would be cool? The stripe is cool, but it might be confusing to the eye from far away. So I think I want to avoid the stripe and pull in some of these other elements. So I'm going to cut it kind of close here because I do like the words. And I think they're very interesting. I'm going to work with the smaller scissors here. It's kind of hard. You have to kind of look underneath. And it might be that I make a mistake. That happens frequently. You can also fix errors as you go. Like right now, I've made this white the right, sort of follow the line correctly. I'm going to put that when I start sewing on top of that red. So you can use overlapping and things like that to kind of make your job a little easier, make it go a little better, make it look a little sharper. And you don't have to stress out about like, is every single line perfect? Now I'm thinking to myself, what would be a good background? And a lot of colors look good with red. You could go with things kind of in the family, like orange or yellow, but I think I'm gonna do something like blue to make it stand out. So let me go grab some blue. So I went through my container of glue and found some good ones. That actually has red on it too, but I really like this color blue. Maybe a periwinkle. This is a little bit darker. This is from like a grain bag. This has a cool pattern. And then I'll cut out those gray pieces and use them for something else. This has blue and pink. I'd probably stick with the blue and green part, just so the pink doesn't get confusing and make your eye think the penguin's outside of the lines. And this is another one of that sort of aqua color. So I'm going to cut some of those pieces. But first, actually, no, I'll cut some of those pieces and then we can start sewing. The cool thing about this is like you could really get a big piece of plastic and just make one giant blue background, and then it would just be very like uniform, like a portrait, like a school portrait. You could also, you know, cut them into as small of pieces as you like. I realized pretty quickly with my large pieces that they go a lot faster if you use bigger pieces. You know, it's not necessarily rocket science to understand that, but it does make a difference. So if you want to really make a meal out of it, you could cut a lot of very small blue pieces and do any kind of like patchwork or pattern in the background that you're excited about. I'm gonna do a couple of bigger blue pieces. I'm also gonna cut along this seam because they don't have a straight line. So like that might look cool there. I do want this pattern too because I really love that. So I'm going to cut some of this out. These pieces are pretty small, so it's a lot of, you know, it's more work, but I think it's going to be worth it. Okay, so now I've kind of got the white, right? It's not perfect. There needs to be a little bit of more of a curve right here. Oh, I hope I did that right. If I didn't, I can always fix it later or leave it. This is art. It's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be stressful. It'd be important to leave that space for the beak. So this is translucent, so I'll definitely need to make sure to cut carefully along the line. Or, actually, what does it look like underneath? Is it going to be confusing, or is it going to make like a cool shadow? It actually might be kind of cool. I think I might leave it like that just to see. I'm going to use a pen. I'm going to use a pen here so I remember which one goes on top, right? Because otherwise it might change the way the animal looks. I think I'm going to need something darker here to make that really pop. Let me look in my bag. So I went back to my supplies and I found this, which is cool, but I think it might be too pink. I think this one might be more what I'm looking for. So I'm going to cut this off. And this wing is going off the corner of the page. We're not going to see it all, but that's okay. This really is just sort of about like learning how to do this. And, you know, after you do one of these, you can go and make as many variations on your own with just the knowledge and the materials you have around your house. I use 7-ounce canvas when I do my work. It's sturdy, but it's not so thick that it's difficult to work with. But I imagine that you could use almost any kind of fabric, and as long as it's sturdy enough. I wouldn't use like a silk, or I wouldn't use a fabric that was polyester or made of plastic either, but you know, that's just me maybe. We got this. This is coming along. You can kind of see it taking shape. It's got a ways to go though. Let's get some of this blue. Before I pin that down, actually, I'm going to kind of cut a curve into this line I think it's totally okay to have like sort of blocked geometric shapes. Packaging is often arranged in kind of blocked geometric shapes, and that can be totally fine. But sometimes I do think it is distracting, and I often want there to kind of, you know, our world is full of a lot of soft corners and shapes, and so I kind of like the idea of, you know, a lot of these animals are in the sky or in the ocean, and so like something that makes you think of the sky or the ocean, I think really works. So that doesn't quite fit there. Maybe this will. But I'm going to cut off the pink. So this is okay that it's all squared off because I'm hiding it behind its friends. I'm going to pin that down. And then what I'm going to do is when I build off of it, I'm going to make sure the shapes are more sort of organic, is what we would call that. I really love this. There's not a lot of it though. Got to use it with a lot of intention. Maybe that will work. And my clippies. I was so glad to find a use for these clips because I bought a box of them about 10 years ago and I've never really, I don't even know why I bought them now. Never really used them very much. Let's see if I can fill that last space in here. I'm layering it, as you see. Let me cut this off just so it's not distracting. I'm going to layer it just so it's kind of filling that space. I really love that pattern. It's a fun pattern. I'm going to pin that down so we know where it is. But we have not used this amazing orange, organic orange wrapper, which I love the pattern of so much. So I'm going to see where I can fit that in. And maybe it'll work and maybe it won't, which is okay. I think I have to concentrate on the pink part because I think the white part is going to be too distracting and I'll have to pull it in. I'll use it on something else. So where did we end up with this? This white, it's like it can have a little bit of white there. It's going to need that white cheek, but we do have a little bit of leeway here where we could, let's remind ourselves of where our line is back there. And maybe it'll look cool layered under this translucent piece. If it doesn't, you can always change it later, add more. I do it all the time. It's a great form of art if you want to just cover your mistakes later. Okay, so we kind of got this. I think I want a slight, oh, poked myself. That happens all the time too. I want to remind myself of where the eye is. It's right there. And I'm going to need some black. This is popcorn. We just have a little circle eye from our perspective. It's pretty round. See if I put that there, if we can kind of see him taking shape. I feel like you can kind of get a feel for their personality once you put the eye on. Oop. But it's going to be layered. We want to make sure it's coming up on top. Can at least get it. Oh, it's going to take a little finagling on our part. This is what my house looks like all the time. Bunch of plastic everywhere. All right, we're just gonna need to make sure, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make my life a little bit easier. I'm just gonna cut that off. See how that looks. I like it. I think it looks pretty good. We're gonna need a little blue around the top. I think this might come in handy again there. Right, so what do we have here? Can pull that together. I want to eyeball it to make sure I'm getting the right place. And I want to add, I have to pull this off to get this guy in here. I'm going to do this just to keep him in place. Oh, I want him to be right along the edge. And I want to make that sort of like organic curvy line here just to soften it. It's coming along. Maybe cut this bad boy down. Oh my gosh. Come here. Get those bits out of there. Let's do this guy. Put the edge off. Ooh, see when I make that even with the top, or is that over the top? Yeah, okay, good. Make sure it's in the right spot. A little bit there. For the most part, I think it can just fit in here as is. There's a tiny gap up here. Let's see if I can get it covered. While I also cover, this is thicker too, and that will come into play when you're actually sewing. It's more difficult to work with thicker pieces. They're harder to push the needle through. Thin pieces are difficult in a different way because they can be hard because they stretch. Difficult because they stretch. Okay, so let's see if I can get this guy cut without messing it all up. Yay, there we go. There's the beak. And for the beak, I want to use some different tones of gray. Okay, I found a couple of pieces of gray. This is a darker piece. This is a slightly lighter piece. I'm going to do my darker piece on the top and bottom and lighter in the middle. So I'm going to kind of build it slowly and layer it. See if I can eyeball it and get it kind of close and workable. It doesn't need to be perfect at this point. Okay, I need to make sure I'm covering both sides, this crease here and all the way out to the end of the beak. And so I'm actually flipping, I just flipped it over because that was a better match. Okay. This is probably the most precise part of the whole thing because it is kind of a delicate piece. Here we go. And then down below, turn it just to give myself a little freedom to move here. So hard when it's so tiny. If you have smaller hands, it might be easier. Okay. Let's see if I can do it without messing it up. There we go. That's kind of like the whole thing. And then I'm going to add this lighter gray here as contrast. Just going to cut a small piece. See, it follows those lines, appears a little tighter. And then I'm hoping that when it's on top of each other, it kind of looks like a beak. I actually think some like white highlights would be even better. This needs to be cut down as well. I have a softer line. Let me pin it all together and see if I can get a sense of what it will look like. Put the little beak in there. Oop. Kind of squish that one. And we pin it all down. Looks pretty beaky, I think. So this is sort of just the guide that we're going to use, right, to have all of our pieces down. I think this chin could be a little tighter. There we go. All right, so this is what I'm going to start sewing on. So now I want to talk about the different stitches you can use. To my mind, there are two main stitches to use on this kind of project. I am not an expert in sewing. There's so many people in the world who know so much more than I do. Okay, so now I want to talk about the different stitches that you can use. And to my mind, there are two primary ones that we use. And the first one I'm going to show you is a whip stitch. I'm not an expert in sewing or in embroidery or anything like that. So I'm sure other people, you know, could tell you about a lot of other different ways to do this, but I'll stick with the things I know. So a whip stitch, as far as I understand, can only be used on the edge. And you basically go in from the bottom if you want your knot to be on the back, which is going to give you like a cleaner look. And then you go around the side and you go up a little bit and you pull it through. So it's this sort of type of sewing that's going to make this really cool pattern along the edge. Now remember, I used 2 threads and I doubled it over. And so my thread is thick, and it's thicker than I normally do on my big pieces. but I thought it would be cool here to show this. So as you can see, I'm just going around the edge. Oop, we want to make sure this guy goes under so that you can see that other stitch. Just going around the edge. And then you can see how the thread goes along the outsides. It's very obvious, bold kind of stitching. I'm doing my stitches close together. I am trying to make them evenly spaced. And that they're close together because that makes it stronger and more secure, as you can probably imagine. I'm making them evenly spaced because I want them to look neat. But you may choose a different approach. So getting close, that seems like it's secure enough, and I feel comfortable doing it like this. So I'm going under and out the top, and then I'm going around and going under again and out the top, under and out the top, in from the bottom, out the top, in from the bottom, and out the top. I'm going to cut this off, right? Cut the needle off. What I'm going to do is just tie it off on front. And it won't be perfect, but doesn't bother me. For my big pieces like the whales, I have to do a lot of tying off on the front because there's no way to get, you know, physically when you're working on the ground to get to the back of a whale. So I tied that off there. It's fine. Doesn't bother me. So I'm going to thread this needle with just one thread thickness so that you can get a sense of what different stitches look like. This is not a very long piece, just a little shorty, but I double it over because I do think it's really important to make it sturdy. So I'm doing that thing again where I loop the thread around several times and then pull it to the end so that there's one big thick knot at the end. Be careful going through because it's like a tiny sword. If you poke yourself, it will hurt. And I have bled many times from just doing just that. Okay, so this is the other stitch. It's called a running stitch. And the idea here, I tell groups when I'm with them that it's like a dolphin. You're just going up and down, up and down. And you can do it one of two ways. You can lift it up and push through, right? And pull it through. But this is the problem with this way, right? Because you get distracted, and if you do this, if you go in from the top, then you'll have to cut it off and start over. You have to remember that if you've gone through to the bottom, your next one has to start with the bottom. So you go from bottom to top, and then top to bottom, and then bottom to top, and you have to alternate, or it'll cause a flaw that you do have to sort of cut out and start again. But one advantage to using a running stitch is that you can actually just work with it on the surface. So I can go from top to bottom and push through. I make like a little hill and push through. It's hard to push through, especially with this where I've got actually the cloth, then the transfer, then plastic, and then another layer of plastic. So I'm going up and down. We call it the dolphin. Just going, you're staying on top. Make a little hill, push through. You don't want to stab yourself, so be careful. So depending on who you are and how comfortable you are with this, you might want to just lift it up and go top to bottom, then bottom to top. And I'm going to make this edge smooth because I do like this kind of like organic curves. Oop. You can see how this thinner thread, so this is just one thread doubled over instead of two. It's a little more subtle, a little more in the background. So sometimes you just pull a piece of plastic through. It's just the nature of the material. I do it all the time. It doesn't bother me. I think it looks fine. So here, I'm going to go up here to kind of meet this edge. Just kind of trucking along, top to bottom, then bottom to top. There you go. So here I have two choices, right? I'm doing kind of a different thing around the edge, so I'd rather keep this on the interior. So I'm just going to go backtrack here, start again on this edge. You need to be conscious of how much thread you have left, because you need plenty of thread to tie a knot when you get to the edge. I'm sorry, when you get to the end of the thread. So I'm just going to tie a knot. I'm going to do one more. I think I can squeeze one more in here. You can see, just like before, I'm trying to use small stitches. I'm trying to put them relatively close to each other. Okay, so this is, I think they look as cool on the back as they do on the front, but maybe that's just me. So you can see here, I'm at the end. I like to leave the needle on while I tie the knot. I find it easier to manipulate. I like to leave plenty of thread. There is plenty of thread. You're going to have so much thread with just this one little skein that it's going to be enough. So what I do is I tie several knots as close to the fabric as I can. So I kind of tie a knot like I'm tying a shoelace, but then I hold it. Oh, then I didn't do that at all. Wait. Let's see if I can recover. So I want to hold it down close to the surface. So then the knot will end up here. Otherwise, you'll have a knot way over here, which is not the end of the world, actually. But it's more secure, and it's gonna be sturdier if you can get that knot really close. I do a lot of knots. I'm kind of paranoid about them popping out later. Again, that might just be me, but you can see that's pretty thick, and it's not going anywhere. Can really start to get very knotted up in a frustrating way. So I do that too sometimes. I've done it many times, and it works just fine. But I do think, even though you have to sort of re-thread your needle more frequently with the small piece, I do think that it gives you more control and there's less loss. All right, so I'm just capturing these little bits and pieces from over near the beak. I want to make sure I get them all and make them secure. Love this periwinkle blue still. Though here, this is a thicker piece. These are two really kind of pieces that are on the thicker end. And I can feel how much more difficult it is to push through. These needles are very sharp, but it still can be a lot to push through. You've got the canvas, and then the transfer, which is another layer. And then you have here two pieces of relatively thick plastic. Makes a difference. I don't want to stab myself. Do want to capture this. All right, so now I've got a lot left. I'm going to jump over to here. This is the seam between these two pieces. And I'm going to see if I can do it a little bit more rapidly. I'm working faster than you're going to probably work right away, but keep in mind I've done thousands of square feet of this by this point over about 10 years. So don't judge yourself. We're all learning. This last bit, and I'm going to get rid of this clip that's been driving me crazy in the process. This is 2 thick layers, that's why I just used the table surface to kind of push it through, saving my hands the work of all that effort. It's definitely much thicker and you can feel it. Thinking about sort of this part of the penguin's chin, it's a little like it could be a little bit more sort of defined. I wonder if I did something like that. It would be a little bit more defined. not trying to give it plastic surgery. I'm just trying to like better delineate the head and the shape of the head. So I'm gonna add this. I do like the way that looks. On other birds that I've done that are the kind of birds that fly in the air, I do a lot of detailed feathers at the end as a final layer. And you could add that kind of detail to penguin as well. They also have feathers, of course. They're just a kind of a different kind of feather. So that's what it looks like on the back, which I love. And this is how it looks on the front. Pretty good little, sweet little penguin portrait. And then I like to sign the back. And then I like to put the date. It's definitely 2023. There you go.